Hi, I'm Hunter Gillens, and for my personal design project, I did what is called a jar reef. These are also known as Nico tanks or jar reef tanks. They are a miniature version of a saltwater aquarium. They face a lot of the same issues that you would face with a saltwater aquarium, except for since the volume of water is so small, even the smallest fluctuation can cause huge changes in parameters, making these to be way more difficult than what a full setup would take. With these, you rely heavily on large water changes to help keep those parameters in check, but they need to have constant help and guidance in order to get to be a thriving environment for the coral. So in order to design one of these to go in my office space at work, I had to come up with exactly what I was hoping to achieve. I wanted to have a 1 to 2 gallon jar, and I wanted to have all the life supporting equipment needed to keep coral, snails, and crabs alive. Future on, we want to look at getting a small fish or two in there, but that was not the goal for this project at this time. I also needed to gain the different desires and the approvals from all the different project stakeholders, which I'll list here in just a minute. This is a breakdown of what I wanted to accomplish during our 4-week period. Um, First off, I had to get all the equipment that I would need. Needed to get a jar, needed to get the salt water prepared, get the live sand, the base rock, heaters, air pumps for circulation, and all of that in there. And I had to get the tank going. So a lot of times with saltwater aquariums, they go through what is called a cycle, and you have to go through the different building blocks of the nitrogen cycle in order to make this a successful aquarium. So that can take a lot of time. In order to speed this up, I actually use some live sand that I pulled out of an existing aquarium already. So that gave me a huge bump forward that actually made this project possible to accomplish in the 4-week period. Otherwise, you'd be looking at 2 to 3 months to accomplish what I was able to do. During the next week, I started adding hermit crabs and snail because my aquarium water was safe enough for them to live and grow in. And I started doing feeding to, first off, keep them alive. Second, to add a nitrogen source to help the bacteria grow as well. And I started doing water changes. This was to help keep the nitrogen levels in check, to keep ammonia levels in check, and to ensure that there's the correct micronutrients for the hermit crabs and snails to live. During week 3, I was really hoping that I would be able to get some coral put in there. I was able to get them purchased and put into a different aquarium, but I couldn't put them in here because I had an algae issue that I will show you in just a few minutes. But I was in the last week able to get the algae under control and be able to finish strong by getting the coral in there. I had several different stakeholders, and this was actually a pretty difficult list to come up with because kind of looks as a personal project, but it actually had quite a few. First off would be Sarah. She was my main financial resource and also my wife. So I had to make sure that every cost that I was able to put into this, she was okay with and that she knew ahead of time. Next was Drew. This is my boss. I had to make sure that things were okay with him to actually install this into my workspace. I work in a highly regulated area, so that was a big thing I had to check off. Next would be my coworkers that share the space with me. I had to get their blessing first to do it because I didn't want to make anyone mad. And second, I wanted to see what they would enjoy and what they would find cool to do with it. And lastly, were the pet store employees. So everything I needed to get for this tank, I had to purchase. Getting some of these different corals, different crabs and stuff in there can be difficult at times. So I had to work with them to ensure that the animals I wanted were available when I needed them. So you can kind of see the progress that things go through. So the very beginning, things are looking good. Water's nice and clear, no algae problems because it was first put in. If you look in the middle one, that's when I ran into my algae problem. So this is very, very, very common to happen during a cycling phase. And since I had live sand, the cycling phase was actually relatively minor and took not as long as it would have things are starting to look good. You can see a big coral in the front, kind of one towards the top, and a couple smaller ones mixed in there. Haven't lost anything yet. Things are thriving, doing well. Polyps are starting to open and look good. So with time, it'll get better and it'll continue to grow. So the results of my project were to create a successful environment that was stable enough to support corals, crab, and snails. And at the end of this project, I was able to accomplish that. I did have to remove some extra rock work that I had in there. It took up too much space for future coral growth, and it also moved my corals too close to the light, and I was having bleaching issues. So quick and easy thing to adjust, pulled out a couple rocks, and we were good to go. And then we, like I said earlier, we fought algae longer than expected, but we're able to get things caught back up once I got that algae under control. Okay, so moving forward, of course, I'm going to keep this aquarium going. Want to keep growing. I'm really interested to see what growth I can accomplish in the next 6 months, having frequent water changes, having the appropriate lights and everything in there. It'll be really interesting to see that. I would like to add additional corals to the jar. This would add more texture, more movement, and more color. And I would also like to look at getting 1 to 2 small fish. I've been looking pretty heavily at getting some yellow clown gobies, as you can see pictured on the slide, or even a clownfish. I don't think I could get away with 2 clownfish in this small of a setup. Probably when they're little, but as soon as they start growing, I'd have to get rid of at least one of them. So I hope you guys liked my project and that things were explained well enough for you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Okay, thanks.